Hello, everybody. This is Gary. Today is August 23rd, 2021. It is 5:56 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the United States and not just in New York. Um, I went to the psychiatric emergency room this morning because I hadn't slept in 2 or 3 days, at least not for more than 2 hours. I was doing really poorly this morning when I woke up about 5 a.m. Actually, I was up all night. I didn't get any sleep at all. I didn't wake up. I just simply got out of bed because I was up all night anyways. Got up around 5 a.m., was pacing back and forth. I was very hot. It's very, very hot in my apartment because it's like 80 to 90 degrees outside here in Rochester, New York. At least that's what it feels like to me. My anxiety was getting out of control. My auditory hallucinations were getting out of control. I couldn't stop pacing. I couldn't stop sweating. I was drenched like somebody had dumped a bucket of water over me every 5 minutes. I felt absolutely horrible. I was feeling suicidal, paranoid, thinking people were plotting against me. So I called 911 and they sent the police, as they always do in New York State. If you're, whether it's a voluntary or involuntary psychiatric emergency, they always send the police before the ambulance to make sure the person's not violent, suicidal, or if they are violent or suicidal, to bring them under control, to make sure they have no weapons, that sort of thing. They also sent a crisis team, an emergency crisis team, basically social workers. They wanted me to sign some papers. I refused to do so. I didn't call 911 to talk to them. I called 911 to go to the hospital. So I didn't sign any papers when the crisis team came to my door with the police. Since it was voluntary, the police didn't pat me down or anything like that. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It depends on the situation. Pat you down for weapons, that kind of thing. So I went with the police and the ambulance. They put me in a gurney. We took the elevator down to the first floor. I'm on the fourth floor of an apartment building that's like 22 stories high. So it's somewhat difficult for the police and the ambulance and everybody to come up to a person's apartment when they have to go up several floors. There's only 4 elevators for 2 apartment buildings that are 22 stories high, and there's over 500 apartments. So it's difficult for the police, the ambulance, and the crisis team to all get on the elevator at the same time and come to a person's apartment, whether it's on the first floor, the 4th floor where I am, or the 22nd floor. It's difficult. They only have 4 elevators, and these buildings are much too large for just having 4 elevators, 2 elevators to each building. And the elevators often break down. I've been here since December, and it's been a common occurrence for the elevators, or at least one of the elevators, to break down, which means the one of the 2 is only workable. I've never run across a situation where the elevators were all non-functional at the same time. But anyways, the police came up, they asked me what was going on. I told them what I just basically told you. So I went to the emergency room, got there around 7 a.m. Immediately, the psychiatrist knew me from being there before. She gave me Zyprexa 10 milligrams and Klonopin half a milligram. I laid down for a while to see if I could calm down. Then I started vomiting. The psychiatric emergency room is an absolute shit show. Chaotic, literal shit show. One of the fucking patients at the emergency room went into the bathroom, took a dump, and smeared feces all over the walls of the bathroom, on all 4 walls, all over the toilet, all over the floor. And that's when I started vomiting. I mean, I was partly vomiting from anxiety, but that was just totally fucking disgusting. And once I started vomiting, they gave me Ativan and a shot in the arm of Zofran, which is for nausea and vomiting. Um, so they gave me Clonopin and Zyprexa when I first got there, and later in the afternoon, when I started vomiting, they gave me Ativan and Zofran for the vomiting, and the Ativan for anxiety. Ativan, for those of you who don't know, is a benzodiazepine, just like Klonopin is, just like Valium, just like Xanax, and a few other drugs. Um, Benzodiazepines can be addictive, um, but they have their place. They can be useful when used cautiously. Um, by the time 2 o'clock rolled around, I was feeling ready to be discharged. Um, the doctor didn't believe that I really needed to be there any longer. I wasn't suicidal anymore. My auditory hallucinations died down a bit. I stopped sweating so much. I stopped vomiting. After I laid down, after taking the Ativan and the Zofran for about an hour, I started to calm down. But it was impossible to fall asleep, which is what the staff wanted to see if I could do. They were going to let me sleep a little bit and then release me. I go, this is too fucking chaotic. I'm not going to fall asleep here. You said I could be discharged anyway, so you might as well just let me go now instead of letting me sleep a few hours, which isn't going to happen. With people smearing feces all over the bathroom walls, 2 people getting violent and screaming and yelling, and having the security guards come up, strap them down to a bed, and get injected with some sort of medication to shut them up, with people yelling and screaming and swearing. There was no fucking way that I was going to fall asleep in the psychiatric emergency room. It just wasn't going to happen. And if the doctor was going to discharge anyways, I asked the nurse to tell him I tried sleeping. It isn't going to happen. I feel calmer. Send me home. So they sent me home. Well, how am I doing now? A lot better. I was worried about losing my apartment, which I don't think actually is going to happen. I lived in subsidized federal housing. I need to get a document from the IRS validating that I did not file an income tax return federally for the year 2020, and I have to get that into my landlord by the 1st of September. Otherwise, I will lose my rental subsidy. And right now, with the subsidy, I'm paying $390 a month for a studio apartment. If I lose the subsidy, my rent will be $723 a month, which I simply cannot afford. So I ordered the documents I needed very early last Thursday morning on the 19th at 7 a.m. I called the IRS. They said they would mail out the appropriate form called the verification of non-filing status for the income tax year ending December 31st, 2020, which is the document that I need to get into my landlord. I've already got the other documents that I needed to get into the landlord, including a statement from Social Security verifying my benefits amounts and my survivor disability insurance. I get survivor's benefits from after my father's death in 2005. Before that, I was on SSI, which really doesn't pay all that much. I was considered disabled, I believe, on May 7th, 1985, before I turned 22. And so while I was on SSI, most of that time after 1985, once my father retired, they put me on disability benefits. And then when he sadly passed away, they put me on survivor's benefits. And my payments went up from about $700 a month on SSI to a present amount adjusted for inflation of about $1,200 a month. And so I was worried about losing my apartment, becoming homeless. I was having ruminating thoughts. I was thinking unrealistically. My thoughts just kept spinning and spinning over the same topic. I'm going to lose my apartment. I'm going to lose my apartment. I'm going to be homeless. I'm going to be homeless. People are plotting against me. My landlord is plotting against me. I know now those thoughts are not true. I'll probably get the documents I need within the next 2 or 3 days by mail, long before the first of the month comes up next week. I'll be able to go down to the rental office, give them the documents they need. They'll do what they have to do to recertify me, and everything will probably turn out just fine. The worst case scenario is I lose my subsidy, and since I moved in last December 1st, I would lose my subsidy if I didn't give them the paperwork they want from the IRS. I would lose my subsidy on December 1st, 2021, and I would be paying $723 a month in rent for a studio apartment, which is actually more than I was paying for a studio apartment before I moved into this apartment. The last studio apartment I was paying for was $625 a month. It wouldn't be completely undoable, but it would certainly be a financial strain, and it would certainly be better than being homeless. But somehow I think this will all work out. I panicked. I had what's called ruminating thoughts. That could be any thought when it comes to my rumination. I can have a thought stuck in my head over something relatively important or something completely unimportant and get panicky over it, start to sweat. I was sweating for the past few days like crazy. I mean, partly because it's hot in my apartment, but mostly because of anxiety. And that's also the vomiting came from at the hospital. I needed to get stabilized. I needed to calm down. I needed to just get myself straight, and just be a little bit calmer. And I think I achieved that today. I don't like going to the psychiatric emergency room because I already described to you how disgusting it can get and how violent it can get. Not with me personally, but with other people. Being strapped down, they have to call up like 4 or 5 security guards from the University of Rochester. They're called public safety officers. They come up, and these are like really big guys. And they, if they have to, they'll hold people down while the nurses and the psychiatrists administer medications by force through a needle. Yes, psychiatry still does that. I try to avoid that scenario as much as possible. It's been a while since I've ever been forced down on a gurney with Velcro restraint straps and had shots put into me against my will. That hasn't happened in a while. 3 years at least, I think. But it has happened. Getting admitted into the hospital is virtually impossible. With all this COVID-19 shit going on, people's mental health is starting to crack under the stress. And there's more and more and more people ending up in the psychiatric emergency rooms, or if they're lucky enough to find a bed, to be admitted into the hospital. The criteria for being in the mental hospital is only 2. Either you're violent or suicidal or both. If you're neither one of those things, then you're probably not going to get admitted into the hospital, even if you want to, even if you feel uncomfortable, even if you can't take care of yourself and you're homeless. If you're not an immediate threat to yourself or others, they're not going to hospitalize you. And somebody pointed out in the comment section and a couple of days ago in my other videos that deinstitutionalization of the mentally ill was a huge fucking mistake based on a misguided civil rights movement starting in the 60s, aimed at mental health patients who were in state mental hospitals, and some private mental hospitals against their will. Often they had spent years there, and these civil libertarians wanted people to be released from the mental hospital, to give them back their independence and freedom and God-given constitutional rights, and what ended up happening, most of those people went to jail, prisons, or ended up on the fucking streets using drugs and alcohol. Good going, civil libertarians. Real fucking brilliant. And part of it, by the way, is the Church of Scientology. Those fucking assholes pushed for the closing of mental hospitals, both private and state, across the country ever since the 1950s. Their stupid Commission on Human Rights isn't a Commission on Human Rights. It's just a front organization for the Church of Scientology, which has a deep, deep hatred for psychiatry. And the fucking Church of Scientology is partly to blame for hundreds of thousands of homeless, mentally ill people, and tens of thousands of more, if not millions, being in prisons and jails for years on end, often in solitary confinement, sitting in their own feces in prisons and jails, and cutting themselves and getting blood all over the place because of civil libertarians, the ACLU, and the fucking Church of Scientology, and the rest of that crowd. They're all assholes. And if you want to see my opinion on all this, watch my video that I already did called Reinstitutionalization and what I think the solution is. Anyways, that's my update. That's what I went through today. Like, comment, share, subscribe. If you want to see me do a specific topic, leave a comment.